Hello, everybody, and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Allison Cooper, the founder of Project Motherhood, and I'm so excited today. I am joined by Dr. Tracee Perryman. She is an educator, a founder, a consultant, and she is the CEO and co-founder of Center of Hope Family Services. And if you look behind her, she has 3 amazing books that you all go out and get your hands on. So I am going to turn it over to you, and you can intro yourself and share with everybody, a little bit more about you and what you do.
Awesome. So I do a lot of things, but I think that the thread that ties them all together is my concern for education and my commitment to putting the tools in front of people that help them be their best selves in whatever field, whatever place they want to be. And so Center of Hope was the organization we founded in 1997. So that's been 28 years ago. And my focus was building the nonprofit arm out of actually a church. And the church was concerned about everyday issues for families. So, of course, spirituality was at the center, but it was also creating a holistic, practical minded space where people could also work on the issues that they were having in their everyday lives. So in building Center of Hope Family Services out from that, my initial focus was education, the education of children and the mentoring of children. And that pretty much came from, I'm probably the 3rd or 4th generation to work with children, to educate children on both my parents' sides. So my father's side, his grandfather started a church and was heavily invested in education and also connecting his congregants to community resources. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a school principal back in the 50s. So I guess it was one of those things, when I graduated from high school, I thought I wanted to be a journalist, but obviously supporting children and families was in my blood. So here we are 28 years later, winning multiple awards in literacy, also serving 4 school districts and building a family resource center out of that, because what we know is that children are not okay unless their parents are okay, and parents are not okay unless their children are okay. So even when you have the focus of youth or adults, you have to have provisions for the entire family, I think, to be successful and to stay around for almost 3 decades.
Wow, that is, absolutely amazing. I love hearing that story. Congratulations to you for everything that you have accomplished. That's amazing. The work that you do, it beautifully blends education, empowerment, and community impact. What inspired your journey into, the role of advocacy for children and families?
So again, it was kind of in my blood. My father started coaching at the age of 17. So I kind of grew up with parents who were very involved in working with children. My father coached. He also had a leading role in Christian education for children, also mentoring children. My mother was an early childhood educator. So these are the things that I grew up just seeing. They were just, and children were always around. Children were always kind of clamoring to get to my parents. And they created an open space for children to come and be adequately supervised, right? And to have a safe place to be nurtured and to grow. So when my parents started the church, Center of Hope, and I started it with them, then we were able to move from kind of doing these tasks for other organizations and taking the skills, the strengths, the experiences, and building into our own church. And so I started off mentoring and tutoring children. And from there, we saw that we were pretty good at it. And then I graduated from college and then went back to college again and college again for a master's and PhD, and learned how to take these practices, these successful practices, and scale them up to something much bigger than what one small congregation could provide. And so again, we went from a vision really that was passed down from their parents and grandparents, right, to what they were doing to what I am now leading. And that's bringing in a community of children from urban districts and suburban districts
Mm-hmm.
and just working class districts, and serving all of these children in the same space, exposing them to things that schools used to be able to do, but for whatever reasons they can't. So visual and performing arts.
Mm-hmm.
Also coding classes, right? Every day they have to complete some sort of elective in addition to their homework help and their tutoring. And so that's when we're able to tap into those strengths that children have that aren't always mined out in traditional educational spaces, and
Mm-hmm.
giving them the lessons to provide to refine their gifts, because affordability is often an issue. So my niece attend suburban schools and private schools, and she's done that all her life. And so when I wake up every day, I try to create the same experience I would expect for her.
I love that. I love that. Do you have any advice you could give our educators of today?
I think to work collaboratively with community-based organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I think that our K through 12 educators are continuously asked to give more with less.
Mm-hmm.
And there are programs that are funded to fill in those gaps, but we need to inform each other. So I think as they become more connected and can refer children in after school spaces to be
Mm-hmm.
exposed to those extra um, enrichment pieces and things like that is very helpful. And I think that after school providers will also benefit from their expertise as to how to manage children and how to scale up their programs beyond just babysitting to being full education resource centers.
I love that. What about just any advice for parents to get more involved, or how can they advocate to bring these programs that are so necessary to schools that don't have them?
Absolutely. So I think it's very important for parents to enter the space knowing what is developmentally appropriate for
Mm-hmm.
age level. And there are a lot of resources online. The CDC has guidance on developmentally appropriate expectations for children. And I think that helps send children to school ready to learn and ready to compete, ready to excel. It's an even better word. And then I think that there are resources at the school level. I advise parents to ask for all of the curriculum resources for textbooks. So
Okay.
that way, when they're working with their children, they are working in a streamlined fashion and not trying to guess, anticipate what children should know, what they need to know. I know a lot of children are stumped just on the languaging of textbooks and trying to think like the textbook. So I think when parents go to schools and ask for those extra tools, it can be very helpful.
I love that. I love that. So, as we think about raising emotionally intelligent, connected kids, how do we model the balance between embracing tech and maintaining our humanity?
So one thing that I continuously harp upon is remembering that AI is a tool. It is not a parenting approach.
Yes.
And before you work with AI, before you select a tool, the
Mm-hmm.
first thing you need to do is research and understand the indicators of healthy child development and related strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Because any AI tool can say it's rooted in best practices, but how do you know that?
How do you know it? Yep.
Another thing to remember is that one of the indicators of a high functioning youth development program, which parents can draw from, is connected and bondedness with safe adults.
Mm-hmm.
AI can't do that. So it does not.
Yeah.
Um, it's a tool. It's not something that it cannot substitute for parenting, nor can it substitute for adequate adult supervision. And I can tell you that for over a decade, we've used computer-based tutoring tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that students perform better when there is an adult in there supervising and monitoring and encouraging that child, as opposed to just saying, here's the tool. Now students get on here and use it and follow it, even though it's individually adapted.
Mm-hmm.
that program cannot substitute for an adult that the child respects and cares
Mhm.
about saying, good job, or
Yep.
try again, or how can you approach this problem in a different way?
Yes, that's so true. It doesn't have that human element as much as it tries to. In your opinion, what are some of the benefits of AI tools to modern parenting, as well as, where should we be drawing the line?
Absolutely. So, one thing about AI is that it does increase access to information.
Mm-hmm.
If the family has access to the internet, or of course an iPad that has, capability, has a phone line attached,
Mm-hmm.
a child can go places in their mind or through research that they may not be able to go physically. So
Mm-hmm.
that definitely can be a benefit. Also, for children who struggle with literacy, there are some tools out there that are audio based,
Mm-hmm.
where you can scan in a child's homework and then the app reads the directions to the child. And I think some of them, even the child can speak and the answers can be displayed. So for children who have issues with reading or writing,
Mm-hmm.
that could definitely be a tool so that they don't fall farther behind.
Yeah.
There are some tools that highlight the words so that children can start to make associations. So I think those parts can be very, very, very helpful. But what we have to do is make sure that AI is not doing all the thinking. So I watch children and I watch adults. And
Mm-hmm.
I watch to see if they take the first answer AI generates.
Mm.
One thing that, just my own use of it, is to make sure that you're investigating the sources that AI cited.
Yeah.
I remember doing some medical research on using it, and you Google now, AI generates a response.
Yeah.
And the response was very dismal. And I said, well, wait a minute. Let me check and see, where did these sources actually come from?
Mm-hmm.
As I looked, the sources were not medical journals.
Oh.
So, they were editor op-eds and things like that that may have cited a source, but again, they took it and interpreted it the way they wanted to. So I said, well, let me go look for some verified journals. Now, AI will give you some sources that they pulled from, but the medical journals were way at the bottom. And so I looked up one and it said these uh the mortality rate, or the life expectancy, should be interpreted with caution. Why? Because they're using data from 1982 to 2004 and it's 2025.
Yeah. Wow. That's a huge boo-boo.
Yes. So when you think about interpreting knowledge, that's something that children and adults need to do, and children would need assistance. So that, again, adult supervision is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Um, Another thing, I always challenge children and adults to ask, are there any conditions under which the explanation doesn't make sense? So one time there was a debate over temperature and climate. And you work in an office, people have all kinds of
Yeah.
different thoughts. So someone went to AI and said, oh, according to AI, the temperature should be 72 to 78 degrees. Now, 72 to 78 degrees doesn't work for me in the summertime or
Yeah.
in the winter.
Yeah.
So I sent them playback. I said, would you go back and check and see if people have asthma or thyroid conditions? Does that work in the same? And so then when they look back, say, oh, no, it should be 68 in case you have people
Yeah.
who have certain medical conditions. So that's another example of how we work internally with adults and children to say, okay, under what circumstances could this answer not make sense or not be workable?
I like
So,
that. That's a great tip, adding that in there, because kids are, they're raised in this generation of AI and they don't always know that, not to take it for fact.
no. And AI only works as good as the questions that you ask it.
Mm-hmm. Got to be very, very specific.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Love that. So other than the mistakes, obviously, what are some risks of us leaning too much on AI?
So again, AI cannot replace human interaction or human bonding. AI can't show empathy.
Yeah.
AI can't teach social conventions like how to be polite or how to read nonverbal cues when
Mm-hmm.
you're in a room. So if we rely too heavily on it, we're going to lose opportunities we can lose opportunities to tailor teaching and discipline to the child. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's going to give you generalities, but you still have to know your child. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the same as texting, right? I can text something in a certain tone, or it can be very general and it can be interpreted 5, 10 different ways.
Yep.
Being in the room to pick up on my body language, to pick up on um, my tone of voice, all
Yeah.
of that matters. So remember, the majority of communication is still nonverbal.
Mhm.
So how can AI really substitute that? It can't.
That is so true. It is so true. So you've done incredible work in culturally responsive parenting. Do you feel that AI has the capacity to be culturally aware or inclusive in its guidance to parents? Why or why not?
So it all depends on where AI pulls its sources, and when we start looking at apps, who developed them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible to develop culturally diverse apps depending on the child, depending on their background, um, depending on the generation the child is growing up in. So there are so many different cultural variables. And I think that sometimes we over rely on, or we have a hyper focus on race and ethnicity, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't always look at, you know, income. We don't always look at even geographical
Mm-hmm.
considerations and where a child is raised. You have to take all of these race and ethnicity for sure, but you also have to triangulate with all of these other experiences that matter. What about because a child of color raised in an urban versus a rural versus suburban, there may be some thematic similarities, but there are a lot of thematic differences as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
True.
whoever is developing the app needs to be knowledgeable of all those things. And then also generationally. So it depends on who's raising the child. Parent
Mm-hmm.
versus grandparent versus great grandparent. There are so many variables to take into play. So I think that there is an opportunity to create apps that are helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they won't do all the work. And I also think that app developers need to think about instructional guides and really need to start doing consultation
Mm-hmm.
to help people figure out who this app is really designed for,
Yeah.
who it works best for, and how the app works best, rather than just having things on the internet and people pull them and trusting them to be able to interpret all of that.
Absolutely. Do you, by any chance, have any recommendations that you could share with our parents?
So I think it's kind of early. So I'm kind of hesitant to recommend
Yeah, agree.
too many apps, but I think I would have to pull something right quick. I could tell you from a tutoring standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
We use iReady, which is individually interactive software. But again, we have to be involved. There have been a lot of app developers that have tried to sell their apps and services to us. I'm still kind of on the fence. I think working through it, and I feel like before a child uses it, I think an adult needs to go through it first. But there are some learning apps that I think could be helpful. So let me stay in my lane. Natural Reader,
Mm-hmm.
Speechify, and Kurzweil are
Mm-hmm.
good for children who
Okay.
struggle with literacy. The
Well,
social emotional ones I'm still reviewing.
I love that. Thank you for that. I know I kind of threw a curveball question at you there with
And no,
that.
it's no worries. But and that's what I said, it's so early
Yeah.
that, and I understand that there is a need to feel like you're ahead of the curve and not being left behind. I'm seeing workshops and discussions spring up daily
I
on
believe
the
it.
topic. And what we've done is stuck to what we do best and what we are really in business to do, is to educate children and
Mhm.
start to bring in tools purposefully as we see that the tool matches the need. And so natural reader, Kurzweil, those have been for children who have been diagnosed with learning disabilities related to literacy and language. So those I feel comfortable with, but you have to look and see if the child is using an iPhone or a phone or a Chromebook. So you still have to do the research on what device it works best with and what its capabilities are. But I do really like being able to scan in student homework. And for those children who have trouble reading and writing, the instructions are read to them to make sure that they comprehend and understand them, and then go from there. And then they can even speak the response if they're struggling with written language.
I love that. I feel like that can really take the weight off of parents too at home when they're helping with homework, because it's so funny. We were actually just talking about this last night in my household. Our daughter, who's 8, she was, we were helping her with the last bit of her homework, and then we were talking to my son, who's 16, and when he was 8, he was given 2 to 3 hours of homework every single night he would get home from school. Oh, and we would struggle through it. And I think that, having these tools available, it creates, are some great things about it, but then there's also, that need of parents to do their due diligence with research before they jump on anything.
Absolutely. And talk to the school day teachers as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are receiving professional development and can point you to the resources that align best with the curriculum that they're teaching.
That's a great tip. So what about, just kind of switching gears a little bit, parents who are turning to AI tools to make some of these sensitive or child development decisions? What are things that parents should be taking into consideration before turning to AI to make these decisions for us?
So I say look at best practices and do the research. So Eccles and Gutman have done a lot historically on positive youth development. I think that that's helpful. I think the 40 developmental assets, that kind of gives you a framework of what you want to cultivate in your child.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned before, the CDC has guidance on developmentally appropriate expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you want to start with a healthy framework. Okay, what are we trying to instill? And what is reasonable to expect from my child based upon the age he or she is? Also, I think the approach. Now, there's been a lot of debate about gentle parenting, authoritarian parenting.
Mm-hmm.
I think authoritative produces the healthiest children.
Mm-hmm.
So, doing research on authoritative parenting, like what is the framework? What are examples for appropriate discipline or setting boundaries or things like that? So, I think that I am still a proponent for traditional research,
Mm-hmm.
and then starting to Google which tools align with that research. But again, I think if you can ask AI specific questions, like if I'm trying to set boundaries for my child at age 6, what language should I use? I think it can be helpful. But I think in terms of making decisions about a child's future or we're concerned that a child may be trending in the wrong direction, I think you need to interpret that with caution.
Yeah.
I think with colleges, for example, general, how do we pick, right? But you still need to visit, and your gut needs to tell you if it's a fit.
That gut feeling.
Yes.
So what about kids who are now, right, we're using adding all of these apps and AI tools into it's part of their daily routine now. Are there any developmental gaps or emotional issues that can arise from overuse?
So again, if children are overusing AI, it can inhibit their ability to uh, interact with other individuals in a productive and healthy way. We had this debate about texting. Now that we just text IKR, I know, right? Like not complete sentences. And sometimes that language, especially dealing with people one-on-one, can be terse.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start working in a group environment, some of the things that the habits that we're developing might not be helpful. And understanding that people don't function like AI, like you can't just go to a person and say, hey, I want to know this, and then it generate instantly. So I wonder what this is going to do for our patients.
Yeah, it's going to we're all
and how
be
we're
like,
going to
want the
relate
answers
to
now.
Yes, want the answer. And that you just tell and you can give commands and something happens. And in a work environment, we're learning that a command-driven environment is not always healthy or productive, and it comes with its challenges.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It does feel like just yesterday we were having these conversations about texting, and now it's like this new technology is out there. It's incredible how fast things transition. So before we sign off, I am curious if there are any core messages that you want to share with parents just navigating the digital age around AI and what that would be. If there's, just one or two things that you want parents to take away and know.
Okay, so I believe that AI can be a very helpful tool, but I also believe strongly in community. And so, for example, in our Family Resource Center, we convene monthly group support sessions with follow-up individual sessions in between. So I can tell when a parent uses AI to complete their homework assignments, and it works pretty well as a starting point, right? But through training and experience, I'm able to take those responses and help participants dig deeper, right? And think critically about the issues in their lives and the goals that they're setting. So I think that AI is a helpful tool, is a helpful research source, but does it have the capacity to challenge humans in building life skills, social skills, or self-actualization? Not quite. So I think that if we want to be challenged to be better and to innovate and do better, then I think we need to make sure that we keep AI in perspective and in its proper place.
I love that. Those are great words to end on. That is like a great thing for parents to remember as they walk away from this. Well, Dr. Tracee, thank you so much for joining us today. This was such an insightful conversation, and I think that it is such a needed conversation to have right now as parents are navigating this on a daily basis for kids of all ages, really.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I truly enjoyed myself, and I look forward to disseminating the information so that as many parents as possible can learn from the discussion.
I love that. Thank you again so much. Until next time, guys, thank you all for tuning in. We will chat soon.